regulatory compliance, getting the product certified with an NRTL. In some instances, the product needs to be, or the product is destined to be shipped all around the world. And they're in those different markets. Those different markets have different regulations in place in order for that product to be able to be sold in that market. Before you release to manufacturing, you get this product certified with a regulatory body based off of where you plan to distribute the product. Some cases it could be just the United States, some cases just the EU, sometimes all over the world. And there are different certifications that need to be in place for that product in order to ship it and for it to be used in certain markets. Now, the product, before release to manufacturing happens, will go to the regulatory body. It will get certified to whatever standards it needs to be certified to. And that's all well and good. We'll get that report. Okay, the product conforms to these things. It's now up to engineering to make sure that our process adheres to those reports and adheres to the regulations that are in them. You know, the product label may have to have certain information displayed right on it, and the product label may need to be placed in a very particular spot on the product. So we need to make sure that our process is set up to have all that stuff in place. So that's one of the checks that we need to check before we release to manufacturing. Did all of the regulatory certifications that we need to adhere to, are they all addressed in our manufacturing process? Because we could go out and build this thing repeatably and reliably all day long, but if it doesn't adhere to a regulatory listing report, well, then there's a big problem there. So it's another check that needs to be in place.
So here's another place where it gets a little gray. So with the way Mike said it, sounds very black and white. Get your regulatory ducks in a row, make sure your processes are covering everything that the regulatory agencies are going to be looking for, and then release to manufacturing. I think the practical way that it happens, though, is there's some minimum set of markets that needed to launch the product. And the testing is done, the regulatory reports are written, the processes are set up for instance, UL marking in the United States and Canada, and a CE mark so that it can be sold in the EU. That's a typical starting place. It's two sets of tests. They're not harmonized, but they are definitely getting there, and they really are close, so that a test lab would be able to do one set of tests that would cover both UL and say CE marking. Reports would be written, you would tune your process up, and then you could launch. But if you're going for worldwide marking, there are dozens of marks that need to go in the product. And so what usually happens is we'll start manufacturing and the product will be shipped and it'll go to the EU, it'll go to the United States, Canada, let's say, and any other countries that would accept those marks, you're free to go into. But if you wanted to sell to China, Japan, South Korea, and you needed to put those marks for those countries, or Brazil, or God help you, Russia, right? You've got to get worldwide certification. Sometimes it can take years. So you go through it. And then as issues come up when a certain country says, well, the product has to be exactly this way, maybe you spin a special version of it just for that market, because they insist that it be done in this language and only that language. So you'd spin a special version of it off. Most of the time, maybe you have to add a language to the product because they're happy to configure it. We ship products that have computer user interfaces in a dozen different languages. It takes a few years, but every time you get to add a new mark you could put a new mark in the product, a new mark in the label, maybe you've got to tune up your process a little bit. But you can launch with a subset of the markets that you're going into and then work on bringing those other markets online. That's more typical of how it would happen with a worldwide mark. No one can afford to sit around for 2.5 years passing tests before you get to sell any of them.